Hello, welcome to Old Nerd Reads His Marvel Comics in Order. This is episode 97. This time I read What If, #1 from February 1977. Technically, it came out in November of 76. Cover date, discrepancies between shipping date. Anyway, this is kind of a milestone. I've been waiting for this since I started this video series. I've been excited to get to What If. I was a little disappointed, but having never read this in my life, a little disappointed by it, but not terribly so. I mean, this was Roy Thomas' brainchild, and he wrote a big editorial piece in the back of this about how this came about, this title. And so since it's a Roy Thomas idea, and he's the writer and the editor, he kind of, it's almost like a history book. It's not so much of a fun adventure with Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four as one team. It's more of a rehash of the early issues of both titles, and how some of the events would have changed had Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four and they became the Fantastic Five. It's more that than it is a fun adventure, but it does have some cool ideas tossed in there as well. So, classic cover. My copy's probably, I would say, very fine, at least condition. It's really nice for being almost 50 years old like me. And let's see, the creative team. Like I said, Roy Thomas is the writer editor, but Jim Craig is the penciler, and I know I've seen his name vaguely here and there. Once, like, I don't remember who he is, or if he penciled any books in particularly, like if he had a run on anything. I don't recall that, but the name sounds familiar. Pablo Marcos, the inker, and he's a great inker, so he makes everything look good. And well, Jim Craig isn't a bad artist. He isn't like my favorite style, but so this is the idea behind this book is the Watcher is kind of like our crypt keeper, our host, welcoming us to this tale and setting it up and bookending the story with his appearance and his fourth wall breaking appearance. But basically he's just kind of talking about how there's lots of different timelines, lots of different dimensions all stacked on top of each other, which is very commonplace now, especially for Disney Marvel. Like they've gone into that multiverse direction with all of their shows and movies now, where there's alternate histories and alternate timelines and stuff like that. But this is where this is what really kicked it off, was this comic book right here. But what was the difference? So he gives us the backstory of both main characters, the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. Gives us their little origin, one quick splash page. And this would be what happened in Amazing Spider-Man #1, or was it Amazing Fantasy This was probably Amazing Spider-Man #1, where Peter Parker decided he was going to go to the Baxter Building. And I'm not exactly sure where this diverges from what actual events happened and when What If starts happening. But basically, instead of getting turned down by the Fantastic Four, he gets accepted. Here we have one page that doesn't really have to do with the story, but this is kind of like explaining, like, how a split second difference in choice can make the difference between one timeline, one reality, and another. And he uses this car accident to illustrate that theory. But now Spider-Man's joining, but I guess maybe it's Sue Storm that is the linchpin here. She tells as Spider-Man swings off after they tell him they don't need him, Sue Storm says wait. He turns around and comes back, and they offer him a job. Yeah, offer him spot on the team. And so now he's got a job. He can give Aunt May some money, and that makes him and Aunt May happy. And that's about it. Like after that, it just becomes kind of like a history book. Here we got J. Jonah Jameson doesn't like Spider-Man at first, but once he's announced as being a member of the team, then he changes his tune. And we see where the chameleon no longer has a career and lapses into irrelevance because Spider-Man is now part of a team. The Vulture, who popped up in an early issue of Amazing Spider-Man, number 2, to be precise. But instead of just fighting Spider-Man, this time he has to fight the Fantastic Five, and they handle him fairly quickly and easily. Burn his wings off and let him fall. Then we go switch gears to Fantastic Four, and this would take place in Fantastic Four number 13, but the difference here is instead of all 4 of the Fantastic Four going into space, Spider-Man goes, and Sue has to Reed tells Sue to stay home and monitor them, which kind of irks her because, you know, she's getting left behind because she's a woman, I guess. And at the same time, we've got what is his name? What is his name? He has the super apes, and he's like a Soviet scientist. The Red Ghost? Yeah, the Red Ghost. And he tries to duplicate the Fantastic Four's process for becoming superpowered by launching him and his apes into space, and they get blasted by the gamma rays or whatever, and they become superpowered. So we have a big fight between them, and it's just kind of a retelling of what happened in Fantastic Four number 13, but now instead of the Fantastic Four, it's the Fantastic Five. And so they do that. It's just like a real quick rehash of the history, adjusted for this timeline. And at the same time, we've got Sue Storm back here getting psychic summons from Namor, who she's always had kind of a crush on, even though she's Reed Richards' wife, and captured by him. And we find out he's being controlled by the Puppet Master. And then we're back home. And this, I think, must be a mistake, but back home in the Baxter building, Sue's gone, but they're just carrying on as normal because she left a note saying she went to visit her sister or aunt in Schenectady. Visiting our cousin in Schenectady, like the note said. So they're just carrying on like normal because Sue wasn't there and left a note that she was gone. But that was a hoax by the Puppet Master to distract the Fantastic Four from the fact she was kidnapped. Then Namor shows up. He's controlled by the Puppet Master. He says he's got Sue Storm captive. And he says to the Fantastic Four, you got to come to my underwater kingdom to save her. So this must have been a story in Fantastic Four as well, but this is where it diverges the biggest, I guess. There's a fight between Namor and the Fantastic Four, and Spider-Man's really in the background at this point. It's more of a Fantastic Four story than it is a Spider-Man story. But they have a fight, and of course the Fantastic Four prevail. However, Sue decides that she is going to stay with Namor. She chooses to stay with Namor. She was mad because they left her behind when they all went into space. So she's going to stay with Namor. It's a tough choice to make. He puts her in this clamshell, which turns her into an Atlantean, so she can only breathe underwater now, and it's irreversible. So she has to stay underwater. Fantastic Four leave. Reed Richards is crying, but he's a man of science, and he's going to carry on without her. And Sue is unhappy. She says as the Fantastic Four leave, she's Reed, and Namor says, "I will make her forget him in time. I swear it." But that's kind of how it leads. It's back to the Fantastic Four now, because Sue's gone, and Spider-Man blames himself for this, and the Watcher says, and that's how it all shook out in this alternate reality. So, pretty fun story. Like I said, more of a history lesson than anything. but like I said, this ending was cool where Sue stays with Namor. That was a cool ending, I thought. And next issue, what if the Hulk had always had Bruce Banner's brain? And I think I have that issue. I'm missing a few early issues of What If, but I think I have that issue. Here's the big editorial that Roy Thomas wrote as to how this title came about. In the early days, in the 60s, when he first joined Marvel and Stan Lee was still doing a lot of the writing, he said this is what we would do to come up with our stories, is we would ask, what if? And put themselves in the shoes of the comic book reader. Like if you read Fantastic Four, what would you like to see happen? Or what would happen if, what would you think was cool? What would happen? What if? And that's how they came up with their story ideas. So he had the idea to do just a book called What If, with some of those ideas probably that they came up with and never used or whatever. And I guess Roy Thomas, even though Stan Lee wasn't really involved in the production of the comics so much anymore at this point, Roy Thomas ran the idea for this comic by Stan Lee. Stan Lee loved it, so here it is. And this is volume 1, started in late 1960 or 1976 and went all the way into the 80s, 120 some issues, I think, maybe 150, I can't remember. And then it was canceled. And then a few years later, in the late 80s or early 90s, it was started up again, fairly successful, another long run, lasted through most of the 90s, I think. And I have a lot of all of them. I haven't read much of them, but I have a lot of the issues in my collection. So, and they're always fun. Unfortunately, a lot of times, especially in volume 2, they would have just kind of like new artists working on it or new writers. So sometimes the quality was a little low, but there's always diamonds in the rough in them. So they're fun stories. It's cool to ask what if, some of your favorite comic book stories, what would have happened if things had gone a little different. It's just a fun title, and I was really looking forward to getting to this in this video series. So here I am, another milestone met. And I have most of volume 1, so I'll be adding a lot of these into the Reading My Marvel Comics in Order video series from here on out. So anybody out there likes this kind of thing, please share it around with other people you think would like it. Give me a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't, and stick around for more because there's a lot more to come. Thanks for watching. See you next time.